Close your eyes and let your mind drift to the quiet town of Rosewood, where sea winds carry forgotten promises and the sky remembers every love that ever returned. This is a story of coming home, of slow mornings, second chances, and love that lingers like the tide. You are safe here. Let go and sink into the story. Homeward Winds. The road into Rosewood curved like a memory, gentle and persistent. Elena Marlowe hadn't set foot in the town since she was 18, but the air still carried the scent of salt and blooming rosemary. Her rental car rattled slightly as it passed the weathered "Welcome to Rosewood" sign, faded paint curling like old secrets. She eased her foot off the gas, letting the familiarity sink into her bones. She parked outside the old Marlowe house, an ivory two-story home, with blue shutters that blinked against the morning sun. Time had softened its edges, but it still stood proud on the hill, overlooking the sea. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the front door. The creak of the floorboards was the same. Her mother's wind chimes still sang by the window, though dulled by rust. Dust swirled in the light, dancing like ghosts. "I'm home," Elena whispered, though no one was there to hear. She spent the day opening windows, wiping away cobwebs, breathing life back into the house. And that evening, as the sun dipped low, she ventured into town, drawn by the scent of baking bread and the echoes of childhood laughter. The local cafe, The Nest, had changed owners, but not charm. It still had mismatched chairs and flower jars on each table. Elena stepped in, the doorbell tinkling. A man behind the counter looked up and froze. "Elena Marlowe?" he asked, voice touched by disbelief. He was broader now, more rugged, but those hazel eyes hadn't changed. She blinked. "Jonas?" He smiled. "Didn't think I'd ever see you walk through that door again." She tried to smile back, but it trembled. "Didn't think I would either." They stood in silence, history humming like static. Then he gestured to the coffee pot. "Let me get you something warm. You look like someone who could use a cup of something real." Something familiar. The mug was warm in Elena's hands, grounding her as the steam curled into the soft, golden air of the cafe. Jonas sat across from her, one hand curled around his own cup, the other drumming lightly against the table like he was holding back words. "You've been gone a long time," he said finally. 10 years, Elena replied, watching the foam on her cappuccino collapse inward. "Didn't think I'd come back, honestly." "What changed your mind?" His voice was gentle, not pushing like someone placing a hand on your back to steady you. "Not guide you." She looked at him then, properly looked. His hair was longer than she remembered, with a sun-worn wave that hinted at time spent outdoors. There was a faint scar on his jawline, new since she left. Life had moved on for him. But his eyes, still that calm, earthy hazel, made something shift inside her. "My mom passed," she said. The words came out too fast, too flat. Jonas set his cup down. "I'm sorry, Elena." She nodded, unsure what else to say. "She left me the house." There was a pause. "You fixing it up?" "Trying to." "You'll need someone who knows the plumbing in that place. It's a miracle the pipes haven't burst by now." She smiled a little. "And I suppose you know those pipes?" He leaned back, mock offended. "Elena, I've been fixing things in this town longer than the mayor's been shaving. I rebuilt half the library last spring." She chuckled softly. "All right, I might need help actually. I'm a painter, not a carpenter." Jonas's eyes brightened, something playful sparking behind them. "Then I guess we'll have to make a deal. I help you fix the house. You show me a painting or two." Elena tilted her head. "You never cared about art before." "People change." Outside, the sky deepened into a navy hue, and the street lamps flickered to life, one by one. For the first time since she arrived, Elena didn't feel like a stranger. She felt almost like she belonged. Rebuilding walls. The next morning arrived wrapped in coastal mist. Dew clung to the Marlowe porch, like the town itself was trying to keep her there. Elena tied her hair into a messy bun, threw on an old denim jacket, and stepped out just as Jonas's truck pulled up, its engine coughing like it had secrets of its own. He hopped out with a carpenter's belt slung around his hips and a thermos in hand. Figured you'd need coffee. She blinked, touched. You brought me coffee? Don't get used to it, he grinned. But I remember mornings weren't your thing. She took the cup and murmured thanks, then led him inside. The house was still half asleep quiet, but not in an empty way. Jonas looked around with a whistle. You weren't kidding. These walls have seen things. Elena gave him a sideways glance. So have I. He turned to her then, more serious than she expected. I know. They got to work, peeling back layers of wallpaper, poking into water-stained corners, and stepping carefully around boards that groaned under their weight. It wasn't glamorous. Dust clung to her eyelashes. Paint chips rained like dry petals. But there was something intimate about the rhythm of it, the shared silence, the occasional laughter when she tripped over a toolkit, the smell of sawdust and sunlight. By mid-afternoon, they were in the living room, kneeling beside a crooked floorboard. You sure you want to keep this room the same? He asked. Elena sat back on her heels. I think so. It's where I used to paint. The light hits just right in the evening. Jonas nodded. Then we'll fix it. Properly. She watched him work, the way his hands moved with quiet confidence, as if he wasn't just repairing a floor, but restoring something that had been forgotten. Why'd you stay? She asked suddenly. He paused. Here, you mean? She nodded. He exhaled. I had chances to leave. But something about this place, about the way the sea sounds at night, or how everyone knows your name, I couldn't walk away from it. Elena smiled faintly. I guess I did. Yeah, but maybe you just needed time to find your way back. Old letters, new light. That evening, after Jonas left with sawdust in his hair and a promise to return the next morning, Elena wandered through the house barefoot. The floor still creaked, but now it sounded less like loneliness and more like memory. She paused at the attic stairs. It had been years since she'd gone up there. She half expected to find her childhood stuffed animals waiting, or the forgotten boxes of her mother's holiday decorations. The wooden steps groaned under her weight as she climbed, flashlight in hand. Dust swirled in lazy circles around her as she opened the hatch. The air smelled of cedar and thyme. In the corner, behind a trunk of old winter coats, she spotted a faded lavender box. The ribbon was frayed, but the lid still fit snugly. She sat cross-legged and opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Her mother's handwriting curled across the pages like ivy, soft, feminine, a little rushed. The first was dated the summer after Elena had left for art school. Dearest Lena, I put your favorite mug in the cupboard today and realized I still expect to hear your steps on the stairs. The house misses you. I miss you. But I know you're chasing something bright. I hope it's everything you dreamed. Tears gathered before she could stop them. Page after page, her mother had written her unsent letters meant to be read in some distant future. Thoughts, encouragement, updates on the roses that bloomed too early or the roof that leaked again. One letter, though, stood out. I saw Jonas the other day. He's still working at the dock shop. Said he asks about you sometimes. There's kindness in his eyes when he does. I wonder if you ever saw it, or if you were too busy running towards something new to notice what you left behind. Elena sat very still. She remembered Jonas at 17, tousled hair, lazy smile, fingers always stained with grease or sawdust. He'd been her best friend, and then almost something more. But timing had been cruel. Now she wondered, had he waited? She folded the letter carefully, holding it against her chest. Downstairs, the sun dipped through the west windows, washing the living room in gold. The house felt different tonight, like it was leaning closer, listening, hopeful. Morning light and wooden frames. The next morning, Elena stood by the window with her mother's letter still tucked inside her sketchbook. The sky had softened into a pale wash of lavender and rose, and outside, the sea shimmered like polished glass. Jonas arrived just after 8, balancing a toolbox in one hand and a paper bag in the other. "Brought muffins," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Figured you'd forget to eat again." She smiled, already reaching for one. "You remember that?" "I remember a lot of things," he said, more quietly. They ate in the kitchen, leaning against the counters, sharing bites between laughter. And when the food was gone, they fell into an easy rhythm. Jonas pulled out measuring tape and wood strips for the new window frames, while Elena sat nearby, sketching lines across her notebook with charcoal-stained fingers. "You still draw like that?" he asked, nodding toward the pad. She shrugged. "It's how I think." He leaned in, studying the unfinished sketch. "This looks like the old pier." "It is," she said, glancing up. "I went there last night." Jonas paused. "Alone?" "Yeah, it's quieter than I remember, but it feels peaceful now." He nodded, tightening a screw into the window frame. "I used to go there when I missed you." The silence that followed stretched like the space between waves. Elena felt her heartbeat once, then again. "Jonas." He turned, eyes meeting hers. "I'm not trying to make this complicated. I'm glad you're here." Something unspoken passed between them, fragile but rooted. Later that afternoon, Jonas helped her carry a heavy mirror from the hallway. As they lifted it into place, their hands brushed, then lingered. Not by accident. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. The mirror settled against the wall, but neither of them moved. They stood side by side, reflected in the glass, closer than they had been in years. Outside, a breeze moved through the trees, but inside, something else stirred. Secrets beneath the driftwood. That evening, they walked together down to the beach. Elena carried her sketchbook under her arm. Jonas had his hands in his jacket pockets, and the tide whispered gently against the shore. They didn't speak at first. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full of salt, memory, and the soft hum of something growing. "Do you remember the storm?" Jonas asked suddenly. She looked up. "Which one?" "The one that blew through the summer before you left. We stayed in that driftwood shelter by the cove. Thought we'd built something indestructible." Elena laughed, a sound like wind catching a sail. It collapsed after 10 minutes. "But we stayed anyway," he said. "You were soaked, covered in sand. I gave you my sweatshirt." She smiled. "You always did try to fix things." He stopped walking. "I wanted to fix us too." Elena's breath caught. The surf sighed in and out. "I was so focused on getting out of Rosewood," she said softly. "I thought I had to prove something. That staying meant giving up." "And now?" Jonas asked, his voice low. She looked out at the horizon. The sea glowed silver under the rising moon. "Now, I think. I just didn't know what I already had." They sat on a large piece of driftwood, shoulder to shoulder, toes buried in cool sand. Elena opened her sketchbook, flipping to a page she'd drawn the night before. It was the cove, the driftwood, the waves, the shadows of two people inside. Jonas stared at it for a long time. "You remember it better than I do." "I never forgot it," she said. "I just didn't know how to carry it with me." He reached out, tracing the edge of the drawing. His finger hovered near the sketched outline of their younger selves. "You always saw the beauty in things, even when they were falling apart." "And you always stayed," she whispered. The ocean murmured its secrets beside them. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move. They watched the tide roll in together, quiet, steady, and inevitable. The nail that stayed loose. The morning sun found them back in the Marlowe living room. The air was thick with the scent of cut wood and old paint. Jonas knelt by the wall near the stairs, frowning at a stubborn nail that refused to stay flush. "It's like this house doesn't want to be fixed," he muttered. Elena chuckled as she held a bundle of sandpaper strips. "Maybe it's testing you." He glanced over his shoulder. "It's doing a damn good job." She crouched beside him, their arms nearly touching. "Let me try." He handed her the hammer. Their fingers brushed again, deliberate this time. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. She tapped the nail once, twice. It went in clean. Jonas blinked. "Okay, now that's just showing off." She grinned. "Guess the house likes me better." He shook his head with mock defeat, standing and dusting his jeans. "All right, Marlowe, you win this one." They worked for hours, settling into a rhythm that felt right, like something they had done before, in another life. Paint splattered across her wrists, a streak of it landing on Jonas's cheek. She laughed when he didn't notice. "Hold still," she said, stepping forward. With the sleeve of her shirt, she gently wiped his cheek. Her fingers lingered a second too long. His gaze locked onto hers. "Elena," he said, voice hushed. She felt her breath catch. But then the doorbell rang. They both froze. "I'll get it," she whispered. At the door stood a woman, tall, sun-kissed, with short auburn hair and a polished smile. She held a brown envelope in one hand. "Hi, I'm Margot," she said brightly. "You must be Elena." Elena nodded slowly, heart thudding. "I work with Jonas," Margot continued. "I was just dropping off the permit forms he left at the shop. He said he'd be here." Behind her, Jonas appeared. His voice was warm, casual. "Hey, Margot, didn't think you'd come all the way out here." Margot smiled at him. "Well, someone has to keep you organized." Elena stood back slightly, folding her arms. "Thanks for bringing them," Jonas said, taking the envelope. As Margot turned to leave, she glanced at Elena. "Nice meeting you. I've heard a lot." The door closed. Jonas rubbed the back of his neck. "That was nothing. She's just—" "You don't have to explain," Elena said quickly. Too quickly. But the air had shifted. Something quiet and uncertain crept between them. And the nail still creaked behind the wall. Portraits we don't hang. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, except for the occasional groan of wood expanding in the cool air. She lay beneath a patchwork quilt in her childhood bedroom, staring up at the ceiling. Thoughts spinning like wind-blown leaves. Margot's voice echoed in her mind. "Nice meeting you. I've heard a lot." What did that mean? What had Jonas told her? And why did it matter? Because it did. That was the truth she didn't want to face yet. By morning, Elena had painted through the night brush strokes, wild and full of things she couldn't say aloud. A canvas leaned against the wall near the window, a blur of pale blue and fire orange waves, with two silhouettes caught mid-reach. Not touching. Not yet. When Jonas arrived later, something was different. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He worked steadily, carefully, avoiding lingering touches or too long glances. They sanded and painted and measured. but the air between them was no longer easy. It buzzed with unsaid things. Finally, Elena set her paintbrush down and crossed her arms. "Jonas," she said softly, "is Margot more than a coworker?" He paused, caught off guard. "No, she's not, but she wants there to be something." Elena's stomach nodded. "I told her it wasn't going to happen," he continued, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when nervous. "That I was, waiting on something else." She looked at him, unsure whether to feel relief or guilt. "And now?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Now, I don't know if that something wants me back." Her breath hitched. "I left, Jonas," she said. "I broke a lot of things." "I never asked you not to," he replied. "But I also never stopped thinking maybe you'd come home." There it was, laid bare, like a painting hung in the wrong gallery. Honest, unframed, vulnerable. She stepped toward him, slowly. "I don't know what I'm ready for," she whispered. He nodded. "That's okay. I'll still be here tomorrow." And just like that, he turned back to the hallway, picking up a paint can as if he hadn't just set her world trembling. Elena stood still, feeling every beat of her heart as loud as a drum in the silence he left behind. Rain, between the rafters. Rain came that evening. Not the soft, misty kind Rosewood was known for, but a deep, rolling downpour that rattled against the window panes like urgent knocking. Thunder grumbled in the distance. Elena stood by the window in the upstairs hallway, watching rivulets of water trace paths down the glass. She could feel the storm in her chest, too. Restless, waiting. Downstairs, a faint creak. Then a knock on the door. She opened it to find Jonas, drenched from head to toe. His flannel shirt clung to him, soaked through. He held his tool bag in one hand, his jaw tense. "There's a leak in the attic," he said simply. "Didn't want you waking up to a flood." "You came in the middle of the storm?" she asked, voice thin with disbelief. "You think I'm going to let your mother's house fall apart after we've spent weeks fixing it?" She stepped aside to let him in, her heart thudding. He climbed to the attic with practiced ease, flashlight in hand. Elena followed, grabbing towels. The air was damp and smelled of cedar and old books. A steady drip came from the far corner, landing in a shallow puddle. Jonas knelt beside it, inspecting the wooden beams overhead. Just a crack in the flashing. "I'll tarp it for now." He worked in silence, the rain hammering against the roof like applause. "You didn't have to come," she said again, softly. He looked at her over his shoulder. "I wanted to." She bit her lip. "Even after yesterday?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, wiping his hands on a towel. "I told you, Elena. I'll be here, whether you paint or cry or run, whether you choose me or not." Her breath caught. "I'm not used to that kind of steady," she whispered. "Then maybe that's what you need," he replied. A long pause stretched between them, the attic still except for the dripping water and the sound of two hearts trying to find a rhythm. Elena stepped forward. "I don't know how to say the right things," she murmured. "Then don't," Jonas said. "Just say what's true." She reached up, brushing his damp hair back from his forehead. "I'm scared." "So am I." "But I still want you here." His hand found hers, slow and warm despite the chill. The storm howled outside, but in the attic there was quiet. Not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of something finally beginning. Candlelight and unfinished rooms. The power went out just after 8. Elena stood in the kitchen, a matchstick in hand, as she lit a stubby candle in a mason jar. A warm flicker spilled across the counter, throwing long shadows onto the walls. The rain still drummed steadily outside, but inside, the quiet was different. It felt like waiting, like a held breath. Jonas sat at the edge of the living room floor, leaning back on his hands, eyes fixed on the dancing flame. "Never realized how loud the world is until the lights go out," he said, voice low. Elena sat beside him, knees tucked up under her chin. "I used to love power cuts when I was little. Mom would pull out blankets and we'd camp in the living room like the world was far away." Jonas looked over, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Sounds nice." "It was," she said. She made the dark feel safe. They sat in a hush of candlelight, the warmth of it drawing them closer. Elena glanced at the unfinished walls, the bare patches where paint had yet to dry. Somehow they felt fitting, like the house wasn't pretending to be whole, and neither were they. "Why didn't you ever write to me?" Jonas asked suddenly, his voice barely louder than the rain. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. "I wanted to," she whispered, "so many times, but I thought you'd moved on." "I didn't," he said simply. "Not really." Her eyes met his, raw and open. "I was afraid you hated me," she admitted, "that I left and broke something too big to fix." He reached for her hand. "You didn't break it. You just paused it." The flame between them flickered. She felt the rough calluses on his fingers, the steadiness in his grip. "Jonas," her voice trembled. He leaned in, slowly, giving her time to move if she wanted to. She didn't. Their lips met softly like a breath, like a promise whispered under stars. It wasn't a firework, but a match struck in the dark, small, warm, real. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his. "I don't know what this is," she said. "Then we'll figure it out together." The candle flickered, casting golden halos on the walls, on their cheeks, on the unfinished edges of the room around them. Not perfect, but becoming. The suitcase in the closet. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind a washed, clean world and streets that glistened in the pale sunlight. Elena woke slowly, wrapped in the quiet comfort of knowing someone had been there. Jonas had gone home sometime after midnight, but he left behind the ghost of his warmth in every corner of the room. She wandered the house in bare feet, candle stubs on the windowsill and mugs still half full from the night before. Something tugged at her, a thread pulling from memory. She opened the hallway closet. Behind a stack of blankets, tucked beneath a winter coat with missing buttons, she found it a dark green suitcase with a frayed leather handle. Her name was written on a faded baggage tag in her mother's handwriting, Elena for later. She placed it gently on the bed and opened it. Inside were bits and pieces of her childhood, a pressed daisy in wax paper, a sketch of the Marlowe house in charcoal, an old letter from the art school she'd first been accepted into. Beneath them all, at the very bottom, lay a smaller box. Inside the box, folded delicately, was a photograph. It was of her and Jonas. They were 17, standing barefoot on the beach, paint smudged on her nose, his arms slung casually around her shoulders. They weren't looking at the camera, they were looking at each other, grinning, lit by sunset. Her breath caught. There was a note paper-clipped to the photo. "You had something beautiful once, sweetheart. If you're ever brave enough to look back, you might find it still there." Her hands trembled slightly as she held it. Later that day, she called Jonas. "Can you come by?" His voice came through the phone, gentle. "Of course." When he arrived, she didn't speak at first, just placed the photo in his hand. He stared at it, eyes softening. His thumb brushed the corner where the paper had curled. "I remember that day," he said. "You said the ocean was your second favorite thing." She looked up at him. What was the first? He smiled. You were. A silence bloomed between them. This time, it didn't ache. Do you think, she asked carefully, we could start over? Jonas stepped forward, closing the space between them. I don't think we ever stopped. We just took the long way back. And when he kissed her again, it didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like coming home. The town that always waited. Elena hadn't walked Main Street in years. Not like this slowly, without rushing or hiding. With her fingers interlaced gently in Jonas's and the sound of church bells echoing down cobblestone lanes. The town looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she was just finally ready to see it again. Shopkeepers still stood in doorways with their aprons on. The bakery still smelled like cinnamon at noon. Kids darted between bikes and chalk drawings, and the air buzzed with that lazy coastal rhythm that had once made her feel trapped, but now felt like peace. Mrs. Alder from the bookshop spotted them first. Is that Elena Marlowe? She called, adjusting her glasses like they'd betrayed her. Elena smiled, a little shy. Hi, Mrs. Alder. Well, I'll be, the woman said, stepping out onto the sidewalk. You're taller, or maybe my memory's shorter. Jonas chuckled beside her. Still making that lemon tea that knocks people out for a whole day? Only if they've earned it. Mrs. Alder winked. Then she looked between the two of them, eyes narrowing with delight. You two finally figuring things out? Elena flushed, but didn't let go of Jonas's hand, trying to. That's all love is, darling. Trying and trying and trying and trying, until one day it feels like breathing. The rest of the day was full of small moments like that. Old friends waving from across the street, a few surprised glances, but no one questioned why she was back. In Rosewood, people always came home eventually, even if it took 10 years and a broken roof. Later, they sat on a bench overlooking the harbor. Boats bobbed in the afternoon sun, and the water glistened like scattered diamonds. I was scared they'd hate me, Elena murmured. They don't, Jonas said. People don't forget kindness. You were always kind. She looked at him, feeling the weight of a decade fall quietly from her shoulders. You waited a long time. He shook his head. I just never closed the door. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I think I'm ready to stay, Jonas. You sure? She nodded slowly. For once, I don't want to be anywhere else. In the golden hush of the harbor, with the town breathing steady around them, everything felt still and right. Like maybe Rosewood hadn't been holding her back. Maybe it had been holding space for her all along. Blue shutters and Sunday mornings. Elena stood by the kitchen window, sunlight spilling across her bare feet as she poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs. The house still smelled faintly of fresh paint and citrus oil, with a hint of ocean air drifting in through the open shutters. Blue now. She'd painted them herself, the same soft blue from her favorite childhood dream. Jonas wandered in, hair tousled, wearing one of the old band T-shirts she'd threatened to throw out for years. He looked around, smiling like he couldn't quite believe this was real. You're up early, he said, taking the mug from her hands with a sleepy smile. She shrugged, couldn't sleep. Bad dream? No, just didn't want to miss this. They moved around each other easily now, like they'd been doing it forever. Breakfast was simple, eggs, toast, and fruit they bought at the Saturday market. Outside, the seabirds cried, and the breeze danced through the curtains like a lazy waltz. After eating, they curled up on the porch swing, with an old quilt draped over their laps. Elena rested her head on Jonas's chest, listening to the quiet thump of his heart beneath her cheek. You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't left? She asked. All the time, he said. But then I remind myself you had to. We both had to grow. You're not mad? No, he whispered, because you came back, and I don't need perfect. I just need now. A silence settled, but it wasn't empty. She smiled softly. This porch swing used to creak. It doesn't anymore. I fixed it, he said, while you were painting the shutters. She laughed. We're slowly putting it all back together, aren't we? Better than it was, he said, brushing his fingers down her arm. Because now it's ours. They sat like that until noon, watching the sleepy town wake up. Somewhere in the distance, a guitar strummed from an open window. A child's laughter rang out like wind chimes. It wasn't loud. It wasn't grand. But it was everything. Canvas and quiet confessions. Elena's studio was still a mess. Paint tubes spilled across the floor like wildflowers. Sketches curled along the edges of her desk. The light, however soft and golden through the west-facing windows, was perfect. She stood barefoot in front of a new canvas, larger than usual, blank for now. But not for long. Jonas leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching her. You always look like you're listening when you paint, he said. I am, she replied softly, to whatever needs to come out. He stepped inside, careful not to knock over the scattered charcoals. Have you ever painted us? She hesitated, brush hovering in her fingers. I've tried, she said finally, but I never got it right. Why not? Because I was painting memories, she said. Not the truth, and the truth was still unfolding. He nodded, slowly. May I see? He asked. She motioned to a covered canvas near the window. He crossed the room, lifting the drape, carefully revealing a portrait done in deep, moody tones. A man with soft eyes, a woman with paint on her cheek. They weren't touching, but they leaned toward one another, magnetic. Jonas stared at it for a long time. It's beautiful, he whispered, but it looks unfinished. Elena stepped beside him. It is. He looked at her. Why? Because I didn't know how it ended. And now? She smiled, touching the edge of the canvas. Now I think I do. They stood together in the hush of the studio. She picked up her brush, dipped it gently in a pale golden hue, and made the first new stroke light, catching the curve of the man's smile. A tiny detail, but everything shifted. Jonas's voice was quiet. Do you think we're ready? For what? She asked. For what comes next? She looked at him, not just saw him, but knew him. The steadiness, the history, the kind of love that doesn't demand, but remains. I think, she whispered, we already started. And when she turned back to the canvas, she kept painting. Not just because it was art, but because this time it was hers. Theirs. A story no longer paused, but unfolding. Leaves and letters left behind. The first signs of autumn came quietly. A chill in the wind, leaves whispering dry secrets across the porch. The roses her mother had planted years ago began to bow under the weight of fading blooms. The world was softening, slowing. Elena found herself in the attic again. She hadn't planned to be. She'd just followed the trail of something tugging gently at her unfinished threads, asking to be tied. She moved an old box aside, uncovering a small wooden chest carved with vines and stars. She didn't remember ever seeing it before. Inside, wrapped in yellowed linen, were her mother's journals. She sat cross-legged in the dusty light and began to read. The first entry was dated a month after Elena had left for art school. I watch the sea every night. It reminds me of her wild, beautiful, impossible to hold. I don't want to trap her in this place, but I miss her so fiercely I can barely breathe. Another, written years later. Jonas came by today to fix the porch swing. He didn't ask about her, but I saw it in his eyes. He never stopped waiting. Elena turned the pages slowly, heart thick with emotion. Entry after entry revealed a mother who had loved quietly, fiercely, and without condition. Who had hoped, even in the silence, who had watched her daughter leave, not with anger, but with pride, and only a trace of sorrow. The last entry, scrawled in a shaky hand, made her breath hitch. If she ever finds this, Elena, my girl, don't run forever. Some hearts are worth returning to. Some doors never close, even when they creak. Tears rolled down her cheeks, warm against the chill. Later, as twilight dipped the world in amber, Elena walked down to the beach with the journal pressed against her chest. Jonas found her there, sitting in the sand, the wind teasing strands of hair across her face. She looked up as he approached. Her eyes were red, but calm. She loved you too, you know, she said. Not just me. She loved how you stayed. Jonas sank beside her, wordless. She wrote about you, about us. She saw this before I ever did. The waves whispered at their feet. Jonas reached over, took her hand, and laced their fingers. Then let's not waste it, he said. Let's keep building what she believed in. And beneath a sky the color of memory, Elena leaned into him, at last ready to let the past rest, so the future could rise. A room with 2 toothbrushes. The first time Jonas stayed the night, really stayed, he left a toothbrush. Elena noticed it the next morning, blue-handled, slightly frayed, tucked beside hers in the porcelain cup on the bathroom sink. It wasn't deliberate. He hadn't made an announcement or asked permission. He had just placed it there. And something about it made her chest ache in the gentlest way. Later that week, he left a book on the nightstand, then a worn flannel on the hook behind the door. One morning, she opened the fridge and found his favorite marmalade beside her oat milk. No grand declarations, no suitcases. Just pieces of him showing up in the quiet corners of her world. One night, while she folded laundry in the bedroom, Jonas came in carrying a toolbox. "The bedroom window sticks," he said. "Thought I'd fix it." She looked at him, smiling. "You never stop fixing things." She looked at him, smiling. "You never stop fixing things. Only the ones worth keeping." She crossed the room and leaned against the dresser, watching him tug at the wooden frame. "You know," she said, voice low, "this doesn't scare me anymore." "What doesn't?" "This. Us letting someone in." He looked at her softly, carefully, then stood and wiped his hands. "I never wanted to rush you, Lena." "I know. That's why I'm not afraid." She stepped closer, slipping her arms around his waist. He wrapped her in a quiet, steady hold that felt like something planted deep roots instead of sparks. "I don't need a big moment," she said, cheek resting against his chest. "Just don't go anywhere." "I wasn't planning to," he murmured. Later that night, she placed a second pillow on his side of the bed. Not out of courtesy, out of comfort. And when they brushed their teeth together, laughing at the foamy mess, she glanced at the 2 toothbrushes in the cup again. It was such a small thing. But in that room, under that roof, patched and painted and full of history, it was everything. The ring in the drawer. It was a Saturday when Elena found it. She was organizing the dresser in the guest room, once her mother's sewing space, now a quiet nook for paintbrushes and quiet morning tea. She tugged open the bottom drawer, expecting loose thread and old receipts. Instead, there was a small velvet box, the kind meant for jewelry. She opened it slowly, breath catching. Inside was a ring. Delicate, silver with a tiny sapphire nestled in the center. It wasn't flashy or new. The band had a subtle wear to it, like it had been held, worried between fingers, and tucked away when the timing hadn't been right. A folded scrap of paper rested beneath it, her mother's handwriting again. For when she knows, not before. Elena sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the box in her lap. The sunlight from the window spilled across her knees, warm and steady. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just held it and let the weight of it settle around her like soft rain. That evening, as they made dinner together in the kitchen, her stirring something in a pan, him slicing peaches at the counter, she turned to Jonas, heart full. "I found something," she said. He looked up, one eyebrow raised. "What kind of something?" She handed him the velvet box. His fingers paused. He opened it slowly, eyes widening just slightly when he saw the ring. "This was hers," he said softly. Elena nodded. "She left it for me. For us." Jonas looked at her, unsure. "What do you want me to do with it?" She reached across the counter, took his hand, and placed the box inside it. "Hold on to it," she whispered, "for when we know." He closed the box, then covered her hand with his. "I think I already do," he said. She smiled, eyes shining. "Then wait until I do too." And in the golden hour light, with soup simmering and music humming low in the background, there was no rush, no pressure, just two people who had loved each other for a long, quiet time, finally learning how to do it at the same pace. Salt on the wind, stars on the skin. The sky was velvet dark when they reached the cove. Jonas had insisted they come after dinner, no reason, just a feeling. Elena had shrugged, tied her hair back, and grabbed a blanket. They walked in silence, hand in hand, the only sounds their steps against sand and the gentle hush of waves brushing the shore. The cove hadn't changed much. Driftwood still curled along the edges like sleeping creatures. The rocks were worn smooth by years of tides and footsteps. The moon, round and golden, cast ribbons of light over the water. Jonas laid the blanket out on the sand. Elena slipped off her shoes, letting her toes sink into the cool, damp earth. "You remember what you said here once?" he asked as they sat down. She tilted her head. "I said a lot of things. You told me you felt too big for this town, that it couldn't hold everything you wanted." She exhaled softly. "I was scared it wouldn't love me if I outgrew it." He looked at her, calm and sure. "You didn't outgrow Rosewood, Lena. You just needed to see it with new eyes." She glanced around. The waves, the stars, the scent of salt and pine, and Jonas beside her, quiet and steady like the tide. "I was wrong," she admitted. "This place, it's not small, it's full, and I never gave it the chance to show me that." A breeze moved through her hair. She leaned back, letting the sky fill her vision. Jonas stretched out beside her, one arm behind his head. I used to come here and talk to you," he said, "even after you left." Elena turned her head. "What did you say?" He smiled. "That I missed you. That I hoped you were happy. That I still made the best pancakes in town." She laughed, tears pricking her eyes. "I love you," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out like a wave breaking against rock. "I don't need time anymore. I know." He didn't speak right away, just reached over and touched her cheek, eyes shimmering. "Say it again," he whispered. "I love you." And beneath a sky full of stars and salt, he kissed her, not like before. This time, it was the kind of kiss you give when the waiting is over, when the road home has finally ended in the arms you never really left. A house that holds the light. The Marlowe house no longer creaked with emptiness. It breathed now, slowly, softly, like something exhaling after a long sleep. Light filled the corners again. Laughter moved through the rooms like warm air. and there were shoes by the front door that weren't just hers anymore. Elena stood in the living room, barefoot on the old wooden floors, sipping tea as she looked at the gallery wall she'd finally finished. Photographs framed in soft walnut, sketches, a few paintings, one of the beach cove at twilight, one of the blue shutters lit by golden morning light. At the center was a painting she hadn't let anyone see until now, a portrait of her mother. She looked radiant in it, strong, soft, looking just past the edge of the canvas like she knew something you didn't. Jonas came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. His chin rested on her shoulder. "She'd love it," he said. Elena nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I hope she sees it." "She sees you, every day." They stood there in silence, bathed in late afternoon light. Outside, the wind played through the rosemary by the window. The chimes rang, still slightly off tune, still beautiful. "I was thinking," Elena said after a while, "about teaching a class here, in the studio." Jonas looked intrigued. "Painting?" "Painting, drawing, maybe just how to look at the world differently." He kissed the side of her head. "I think Rosewood could use more of that." "I think I could too." They walked together into the kitchen. He picked a sprig of mint from the small pot by the sink, dropped it into her cup. There were no grand announcements, no life-altering decisions hanging in the air. Just two people, in a house patched together by memory and time, choosing each other again and again in the quiet moments. Choosing to build something beautiful in the soft spaces between the past and whatever came next. And when the porch light came on that night, glowing warm under the now perfectly working roof, it lit up a home that wasn't haunted anymore. It was held, loved, lived in. One last letter, one new beginning. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between a grocery circular and a thank you card from a neighbor. Elena nearly missed it. The envelope was cream-colored, no return address, just her name, in a familiar, looping script that made her heart pause mid-beat. She stood on the porch in her robe, sunlight warming her bare feet as she opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, soft with age but carefully preserved. Her mother's handwriting, delicate and certain. "My dearest girl." If you're reading this, then I imagine your hands are covered in paint again, and the sea is singing outside your window. I hope you've let love back in. I hope you've stopped running. You always looked forward, fiercely, but sometimes the things worth keeping are the ones behind you, waiting quietly, like home, like Jonas. If you found him again, don't let go. Not because he stayed, but because he waited without asking anything of you. That's rare and beautiful. And you, Elena, you are not too much. You are light and thunder and stillness, all at once. Don't be afraid to be known. I've loved watching you become. I always will. Love. Mom. Elena folded the letter with trembling fingers, pressing it gently against her chest. Inside the house, Jonas called her name. "Hey, Lena, there's a couple from the gallery in town who want to meet you this afternoon." She stepped through the doorway, heart full to the edges. "Tell them I'll be there." He looked up from his coffee, catching the shimmer in her eyes. "You okay?" She nodded. "More than okay." Later that evening, as they walked hand in hand through the town square, past the lantern-lit cafe, past the cove road where it all began, Elena turned to him with a smile that came from somewhere deeper than happiness. "I want to marry you." Jonas stopped walking. "What?" "I want to marry you," she said again, laughing now. "No big moment. Just this. You always. He blinked, speechless for a moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the velvet box he had kept all along. "I've been carrying this for weeks," he said, "just in case you ever said that." She stared, stunned. "You're kidding." "Do I look like I'm kidding?" He knelt in the middle of the square, light pooling around him like a soft spell. "Elena Marlowe, will you keep building this life with me?" She didn't cry this time. She laughed, kissed him, and whispered, "Yes." And beneath the rosewood sky, where sea and memory met, a love that had waited, wandered, and returned at last, stepped quietly, wholly beautifully, into forever. Love doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it waits in silence. Sometimes it's a porch light left on, a second toothbrush, a promise whispered under the stars. Thank you for dreaming with us. If your heart found rest here tonight, you're always welcome to return. Until next time, stay soft, stay safe. And remember, you are loved.